Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is Sunny Hashmi, the Managing Director of Global Government at Box. Sunny, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jason. I'm very excited to be here.
There's a lot going on in the federal sector, starting with the surge of remote work. It was a rage in the first couple months of the year, so figure March into really June. Agencies are making progress. Every time I kind of listen to a federal CIO talk or someone from OMB talk, they really praise how agencies have really been agile, adaptive, and really scaled out. So what are you seeing as you talk to customers? How's remote work going, and what is Box? How have you been doing working from home as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year has certainly been an interesting one for many reasons, but it definitely has put a lot of the strategies that agencies have been actually thinking about and implementing over the last many years into practice, and in some cases really scale those operations. I mean, as you know, when I was at GSA many years ago, we started to implement some of the key capabilities that have now become commonplace when it comes to remote tools, being able to allow people to work remotely, connecting through mobile devices. Many of those strategies are now, helping agencies to adapt and respond to this crisis that we're in. So generally speaking, actually, it's very encouraging to see how many agencies have actually taken all of these changes in stride this year, and very quickly adapted to new models that allow employees to work remotely in a secure way, and even engaging with their stakeholders, their partners, and citizens in digital ways. And that's all due to a lot of the work around cloud adoption, FedRAMP scaling, mobile device deployments, and security that have been implemented over the last years. There have been a few hiccups along the way, as expected. You were talking about a federal workforce of millions of employees having to work remotely, rethinking business processes, reimagining how work gets done when records are not accessible in physical formats. So some of those things have exposed challenges that frankly need some work moving forward. But overall, it's been a very encouraging sight to see on how quickly and effectively government has adapted.
I've heard a lot from the intelligence community lately about, for instance, rethinking business processes, rethinking how they can get things done. Hey, all this stuff used to be done in the classified world. Maybe we could do it in the unclassified world. And I hear the very similar things from civilian agencies who say, we always did this way, but now we have to do it a different way. And I think that's really what's going on here is this, they're not letting a good crisis go to waste, the famous adage that we hear a lot these days. How are you seeing that happening? What are you hearing from agencies in terms of how they are re-looking at the way they do work?
I think you're exactly right. I think, as you know, the biggest challenge in any large-scale technology modernization effort is the culture change. I think the technology marketplace has been mature enough where secure options exist to do a lot of different things differently, in a more agile way, in a more scalable way, allowing much more flexibility. However, in the past, in the absence of the crisis, the culture change, we've always done things this way, so we'll continue to do them, has been the biggest barrier in large-scale adoption for some of these strategies. But when forced to, get past that in the face of the pandemic, for example, this year, some of those things streamlined fairly quickly. So that's encouraging to see. And also, well, what's interesting, not just in government, but I work across a variety of companies in the private sector that are all facing a similar challenge. And what we've noticed is that the strategies that have to be, invented or reimagined in a very quick turnaround fashion have turned out to be fairly effective. Work productivity has stayed steady. I talked to several CIOs who all noticed and mentioned in various ways to measure this metric, but that generally speaking, their agency employees have been productive. Productivity agency mission is being fulfilled. The biggest challenge that we've heard is that now agencies have to rethink processes that required a lot of physical in-person transactions, such as farmers and producers coming into USDA service centers to apply for farm loans and insurance, or people applying for child support payments for District of Columbia, having to come into the office and apply and submit documentation. Those processes are now getting in the way of full digital analogs of these business processes. Agencies have to rethink the systems, and the business processes associated with those systems in a new way, so that those citizens and those producers and farmers and stakeholders can get this same level of service in a digital first way. And I believe that is going to be the focus moving forward, even after the immediate effects of the pandemic are over and people can start working back in the office.
I definitely want to explore that, what's coming next. But before I get there, let me just take a half a step back. One of the things that we hear time and again is agencies that were a little out in front of network modernization, of IT modernization, of really rethinking how to approach citizen services, or fared better than those who maybe were a little behind. And I think you bring up your time at GSA as a great example. You know, GSA was used to telework. They were used to, when they had to say, okay, 99.9% of all people work from home, it was not a big deal for them, while for other agencies, it was more challenging. So was there a back-end infrastructure or challenge for agencies to access applications? When you talked to those CIOs, was that the initial biggest challenge that they faced?
Yeah, so the initial challenge right in the February, March timeframe of this year, as agencies realized that a large percentage of the workforce will need to work from home for an indefinite future, was traditional IT challenges that are not surprising, right? Scaling network capability, scaling VPN infrastructure, making sure that people, when they log in from home, have the basic security best practices in place. Primarily, the challenges that that presented themselves at the time were agencies don't control the home network infrastructure of their employees. They can't control the amount of bandwidth that they can get. They can't enforce even the endpoint sometimes that the employees have to use. So managing security and privacy in that environment is challenging. However, primarily, many of those initial challenges were overcome through just scaling existing solutions, adding more bandwidth, adding more VPN capability. The agencies that had deployed naturally scalable solutions like cloud computing, like email and collaboration solutions in the cloud, allowing people to work outside of their VPN gateways and allowing for them to connect to mobile devices, were better prepared because they didn't have to invest some immediate capabilities. One of the advantages of these solutions is that you're leveraging a cloud service provider's infrastructure, which is designed to scale at a much greater capacity than an individual agency can sometimes scale their own internal operations. So we saw those agencies not meant to beat, and GSA is a good example of that. There are other agencies that are similar capabilities. However, one of the things that I have heard over and over again from CIOs is that there's a difference between an immediate response that had to be put in place in the first couple of weeks, which may be a less than desirable solution, where yes, it's good enough, you can connect, however, it's not allowing you to be fully productive as an employee because systems are still, bandwidth is still limited, systems are still slow, some of the systems and records are just not accessible. There's a difference between that immediate response and somewhat of a medium to longer term solution that allows an employee to be equally effective no matter where they're working from. And that did require in many cases new investments in technologies and tools, quick migration of certain systems and operations to the cloud, and new strategies that frankly should have been in place in many in many agencies prior to this pandemic, but really brought a new light to the criticality of some of these functions being operational. As an example, we talked to agencies that have never had a data center migration strategy for certain applications, and in the case of the pandemic, now people connecting from all over the country into those data centers caused significant bandwidth challenges as well as computational challenges. The good news is that with all the resources that are available in the marketplace today, through the FedRAMP marketplace, through GSA schedules, as well as the expertise that are available in best practices between the federal SI community as well as the federal employee base, they were able to very quickly migrate some of these systems into platforms like Box and Salesforce and others to quickly get their operations back online. So I'm encouraged by the fact that all this maturity has led to real mission value in this kind of an example. This is the best kind of exercise you can do. When we used to do exercises every year around scenarios that might hinder operations, but there's no better example of how real world challenges can get in the way of agency operations like this pandemic. And I'm glad to see that agencies are seeing this as an opportunity to rethink their operations rather than thinking about reverting back to the status quo or traditional ways of working after this pandemic is over.
It's interesting you bring up this idea of we exercise a lot, but until you actually have to do it, it's a lot different. I hear that a lot with COOP and disaster recovery. All of a sudden, agencies were in that disaster recovery continuity of operations mode, and it really paid off. I had some interesting conversations with CIOs as well. One at the transportation CIO talked about a network consolidation, and I said, well, if you hadn't done that network consolidation, what would the pandemic been like? And he just smiled and said, I don't even want to think about what that would have been like. So I think you're right on that some of those agencies, the early movers, really saw the benefits. We're past the surge. We still are not, there's maybe not a light at the end of the tunnel when the remote working, when teleworking is going to end. Yet citizens still have all these expectations. So what should agencies start thinking about as they continue to modernize, as they continue to say, how can we make sure we meet mission, deliver services?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, this is exactly the topic of a lot of conversation right now. My recommendation to any IT technology leader in public sector right now is to take a pause and really observe the lessons from the last 4 months. Just because employees are able to connect into email and calendars doesn't mean that the challenge is over. So if you forecast that similar kind of challenges are going to continue to present themselves over the next 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, as schools aren't fully open yet and people still have to work from home and single parents have challenges with childcare, this is not something that is going to just go away in the near future. So observe what's not working. This is a great time to do so. Observe what's not working for your employees, where they're frustrated in terms of processes that are broken down, where they can't access their records that may have been physical records that require them to access a building, where citizens can't engage effectively and get the services they need, where systems are failing. These lessons are valuable right now. And those lessons should drive the IT strategy over the next 12 to 18 months. So right now, the time is not to create 5-year plans and strategic vision that sits on a shelf, because things are changing very fast on the ground. The important thing right now is to start to document those lessons, create actionable strategies that can start to mitigate some of those challenges in the near future, in the 3 months, 6 months time frame. The good news for agencies is that the technology world has never been more mature than it is today. The platforms are extremely flexible. There's ways to literally develop and deploy apps in the matter of days and weeks that require very little, coding or artisanal skill sets. So the ability for agencies to prioritize these challenges and actually implement solutions has never been as rich as it is now. So my recommendation is to create 6-month plans instead of 18 months or 5-year plans, and execute against those plans, show value, and then move on to the next 6-month phase. We're actually seeing that happen in organizations like the District of Columbia that migrated their child support payment processing to a digital-only format in a matter of 2 months. That was critical because families rely on those payments, families rely on that business process working, whether there's a pandemic going on or not. And for them to prioritize those kinds of investments rather than traditional investments of data center improvements and hardware modernization and so forth, has led to a lot more trust and a lot more value delivered to the citizens that otherwise would not have been possible.
You bring up a couple key words there: trust, value to citizens, something we're going to explore in the next segment. But let's take a quick break. You're listening to Federal Insights, the Future of Work, sponsored by Box on Federal News Network.